We're told that access is the goal to achieve equality. Is this really true? Let's discuss it in this live. What's the cost of access for Black women healing from the trauma of institutional racism? Welcome to my channel. My name is Marissa Price. I'm a Black woman social worker, healer, educator. And this space is a safe space for Black women and femmes to share our stories, our lived experiences, resources with each other as we process the trauma that we've experienced in environments that didn't want us there, right? So that's kind of the point of this live. As y'all are joining, please introduce yourselves in the chat so we can say hello to you as always. But yeah, just a few questions to get started. How much psychological and spiritual damage occurs during the process of entering into institutions that, again, do not want us there, right? Even with all the access programs that we've seen created, that I myself have been a part of, right? Reflecting on what am I leading people into? What have we been doing, right? Since 1954, Brown v. Board of Education, desegregated schools in the US. What has been the impact on Black students specifically? And even thinking about centering Black girls in this, because Black girls have often been at the forefront of desegregation efforts. So let's talk about that tonight. Yes, as you're joining, please introduce yourselves in the chat so we can say hello. But yes, is the access we have gained worth the price we have paid? Right? We know the mental health impacts of being in environments that are hostile towards us, openly or undercover. And if you're commenting, I can't see comments right now for some reason, but yes. So just starting with the definition of institutional racism. So the term institutional racism was first coined in 1967 by Kwame Ture and Charles V. Hamilton in Black Power, The Politics of Liberation. They wrote that while individual racism is often identifiable because of its overt nature, institutional racism is less perceptible because of its less overt, far more subtle nature. Institutional racism originates in the operation of established and respected forces in the society, and thus receives far less public condemnation than individual racism. So that's just a working definition of institutional racism. Yeah. Hold on one second. Let me get my YouTube app because I can't see any comments. If y'all are here, please introduce yourselves. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I can see it. Hi, Tajay. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes. Yeah, so B Bills, hi. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, so we're sold the belief that access will bring equality. Has this proven to be true? Again, starting with Brown v. Board of Education, which is kind of what I touched on in my video, Being a Black Girl in White Schools, which I've linked in the description section. 70 years later, at this point, I think I had that math correct. What have we experienced in desegregated schools, institutions, workplaces, which I talk a lot about on my channel? What has been our experience? Have we been able to achieve equality by gaining access to spaces that were formerly we weren't able to access? So is having our physical presence in these spaces where people are still openly hostile towards us, and we know that covert racism is very real as well, so it doesn't always have to be overt, but what has been the impact on our psyches, on our mental health, psychological health, spiritual health, throughout this process of integrating into institutions? Hey, I'm Gatling. Good to see you. Good to see you here. Yes, welcome. Shanna, hello. Hi, everyone. Glad to catch you live. Yes, glad you're here. Glad you're here. But yes, mental health, right? So our self-esteem takes a huge hit when we are in places that do not want us there, that are hostile towards us, right? And intersectionality is very important to mention here too, which is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. How does being Black, being a woman and all the other intersections that a lot of us have, gender, right? Sexual orientation, ability, age, poverty, wealth, right? All of these things kind of intersect to create the experience that we have in a lot of these institutions that are openly against us the minute we step foot in the door. And so, how are we being impacted by this? The microaggressions that we experience. And microaggressions just meaning like on an individual level, the aggressive behavior that we experience that affects our psyches over time. What is the real impact of this? So if you have been in an institution, a school, education, workplace where you've experienced some of these issues, you've been able to access the places. That's the first step. But have you felt like you belonged? Have you felt included? Like people wanted you to be there? And if not, what has been the impact on you as a person? Right? And part of this is really like coming back into our humanity. How are we being impacted? Even thinking about folks who are on the front lines of integrating places, right? And just like on the cover that I have on the thumbnail, Elizabeth Eckford of the Little Rock Nine. What were their experiences of entering these institutions at such a young age, right? In high school, the hostility that they encountered and how has that impacted them throughout their lives? Even Ruby Bridges, the New Orleans Four, who desegregated school system in New Orleans, the impacts that have been on their lives from doing these things. And again, Black girls have been on the front lines of integration efforts throughout history. And so it's important to center our experiences when we're talking about how has institutional racism impacted us generationally. Try to get that word out, but yes. So just a few questions like, did things improve or did things change? That's an important question to ask. Is it access? Should we be seeking access or liberation? That's a question that I have as well. A lot of us have gone from pet to threat in workplaces, which I've talked about before, not just in workplaces, but in school settings. We've gone from pet to threat, right? People not wanting us there. And what has been the impact of that? Also the school to prison pipeline, right? That impacts Black students disproportionately. Just some effects of being in racist institutions that did not want us there, that do not want us there, and that make it clear when we do gain access, the things that we experience afterwards is often very traumatic. Yeah. B-Bill says working for the government has many pluses, but it's like running a gauntlet. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I can only imagine. Ooh, yes. Yeah, but how is this, again, impacting our mental health? Right? The psychological and emotional toll of being subjected to discrimination, unfair treatment, aggressive behavior, day after day. The cost of this is not small, right? And so really being honest about our experiences, because we haven't really had a place before to say what these experiences have been like. And really thinking about like the generational rifts that sometimes occur because of the message of the progress that has been made. And a lot of us are experiencing firsthand, this feels like a century ago sometimes in these workplaces, in these institutions. And so that, that rift, right, can be another thing between generations. Really being honest about your experiences and then having people maybe question what you went through. That can cause other mental health impacts. So yes, reclaiming our power and identity. How do we reclaim our identities from spaces that didn't want us there, right? That told us that something was wrong with us, something I always try to emphasize on my channel. Nothing is wrong with you. So starting at that point, when you begin to encounter stuff in your external environment that's harmful to you, can you like turn inward and be like, first of all, nothing's wrong with me. I'm great as I am. I'm amazing as I am. And what I'm experiencing is a result of being in an oppressive environment that is not welcoming to me, no matter what they say. That's another thing, like the marketing that draws us in. Has this been true? Have we been able to be ourselves in these institutions? Um, and if not, what is the cost of not being able to be your authentic self day after day? The mask that you have to wear, right? That's an important question too. So yes, so advocating for ourselves. Hey Erin, good to see you. Good to see you here. Yeah. How can we advocate for ourselves within these institutions? Advocate for our self-care, for our well-being. And sometimes that means leaving institutions, right? And not taking on the feelings that we're failing at anything by prioritizing ourselves, by preserving ourselves. That's an important internal narrative that needs to shift, right? You're not failing, you're actually preserving yourself and who you are and your mental health. So yeah, just going through my notes. DEI programs, have these been effective? If anyone has participated in a DEI program, I know I have throughout college, workplace settings, even been in DEI programs, and a lot of the ways that I felt in these programs is not great. Is not great. Having your picture taken a lot for the marketing materials, right? But not behind the scenes, you're not being supported. You're not being uplifted in the way that you should be. Sometimes you're not even being welcomed. I've had that experience as well. And so, what has been the impact of these things? We're able to access the spaces, but the impact is not small. The cost is not small to ourselves, to our psyches, to our mental health, our well being. And so, just asking those questions, right? What has that been like? And just asking, is the cost worth it? Is it worth it to be able to access these institutions? Hey, Giovanna, good to see you. I just spoke to Giovanna. Yes, it's a particularly difficult thing to fit in education because you're expected to fit a mold that may or may not be who you are, especially in leadership. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that. Yeah. A mold that may or may not be who you are. And how does that impact you? Right? Even leaning into nothing's wrong with you. That's difficult for us a lot of the times when people throughout our lives have told us that something's wrong with us. And we have to take on an identity that doesn't even feel correct. It doesn't fit. But we've taken this on to survive because of the messaging that we've received, that we have to fit into these molds, that we have to be someone who we're not, to be a leader, right? To be successful. All of these markers that are like externally generated. But who are we internally? Sometimes that's a difficult question to ask ourselves, right? Hey, Tracy, good to see you. Yes, yes. And I think Giovanna has a video on, is it boundaries? I saw it pop up on my watch later. Yes. So please check out Giovanna's channel as well. Hey, Marilyn, good to see you here. Yes. Aaron says I have a self-preservation statement with my email. Oh wow, email signature, just because I want everyone to know I need boundaries and they should need them too. DEI is the worst. Yeah. I love that you have that statement at on your email signature though. I love that. Yeah. And boundaries are important. And they can be very difficult to put into place. Again, if you're in an institution, an organization where it's like counter to what the culture is like, that you're supposed to just do everything, especially for Black women, a lot of the positions that we're in, right? To take on more work, more responsibilities. So setting boundaries is not always easy, but it's necessary to preserve your wellness and yourself. which is required, right? Because this experience is for you. This earth experience is for you. Yeah. Hello. Yes. Good to see you. Yeah. So we're often told that these things were in the past, right? And then we experience them in the present day. So that makes it more confusing because the narrative is not matching up with our lived experience. So some of us may start self-gaslighting, right? I can't be experiencing this because this was in the past. I was told I would not encounter this going forward. And yet here I am. So that cognitive dissonance, a lot of us will start gaslighting ourselves about what we're experiencing. And that can be dangerous when you start questioning your own reality because of the environment that you're in is gaslighting you. Once you turn that in on yourself, it can be a slippery slope to depression, right? Not having touch with what you're actually experiencing. And so to be aware of that, right? By writing yourself what you're experiencing, by taking voice notes, by recording what you're experiencing day after day so that you have that proof for yourself. If you do start to go down the road of self-gaslighting, you can pull yourself back out and be like, no, I actually did experience this. Yeah. So yes, what was the impact with Black girls often being placed on the front lines of a lot of desegregation efforts throughout history, throughout the civil rights movement? We have the New Orleans Four, the four little girls in New Orleans, the girls in the Little Rock Nine, Dorothy Counts in Charlotte, North Carolina, who desegregated public schools, Claudette Colvin in Montgomery, Alabama. All of these experiences where Black girls were on the front lines, what was the impact on their mental health, on their psyches going forward, right? To be in places where they were not wanted and to have to deal with that at such a young age, right? How did that impact their development? I think that's important, a question to ask. And was it worth it? Was it worth it to gain access to these institutions, the trauma that they endured, the mistreatment, right? Just looking at the pictures. I mean, it's like people yelling at them, having like dolls and stuff like that. The trauma that happened, right? That occurred, that made on these people who were entering institutions before they could even realize what they were entering into. What was the impact of that? I think that's important to ask. Yeah. But yeah, self-care and healing. Thinking about the mental and emotional toll of institutional racism, journaling may be helpful, again, to tell yourself your own experience as you're going through this. Meditation, setting boundaries where you can, discussing the importance, yes, reconnect with joy, rest, and creative outlets to help process what you're experiencing in these environments, right? Ancestral work may also be helpful. Realizing that we descend from healers, a lot of us, from people who had knowledge of ways to process these deep things that we're experiencing. And it doesn't just have to be individual, as we're taught often. We can go to our lineages and reclaim those healing practices that we incorporated over time. So yes, y'all, if y'all have any healing tips, things that you have done to protect yourselves within these environments, different costs that you've noticed after entering, after gaining access to these environments, what has been the cost to you? I would love to hear that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Aaron says English is seen as a status quo. 100%. 100%. Yeah. No, because at times I feel as if I am the new oppressor. Wow, because of my proximity to whiteness and my family's proximity to whiteness for generations, especially to new refugee communities. Oh, when English is seen as a status quo. Yeah. 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 Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Thank you. Let me write that down. Yeah. And just recognizing that, I think that's huge, having that awareness, right? Being aware of the ways that maybe internalized oppression has occurred, because a lot of us are not even cognizant of that. We're in oppressive environments. We've internalized what we've, like negative thoughts and beliefs about ourselves, right? And then how are we carrying those out amongst other people? I think that's important. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, Mira. Good to see you here. Yes. Yeah. But yes, community healing. So having spaces like this to process what we've been through, to realize it's not you, right? You're entering into institutions, again, to emphasize is that do not want you there often. Just sitting with that radical acceptance. And sometimes that's difficult to acknowledge. But in healing, right, that can be healing to sit with that truth, that nothing is wrong with you. You're in an environment that has these things in place to literally keep you out. Yeah. And so, yes, how can we go forward, right? What are the strategies going forward? I don't have any like concrete answers to this, but I think self-preservation is key. If you notice yourself deteriorating in some of these environments and you have the power to leave, can you make your exit plan? Right? If you notice yourself being harmed, can you tell yourself, I don't deserve to be harmed and I was not put here to be harmed? And I'm taking myself out of this environment. Yeah. Hey, Maya. Good to see you. Good to see you here. Butterfly effect. Hello. Yes. Feeling powerless and being complicit in perpetuating the institutional racism. Ooh. Feels like access to the corporate or C-suite space comes at a price. 100%. Yep. Yeah. Yep. That resonated. That resonated. Yeah. Because a lot of us are told to seek these positions, right, of power. But what is the price? What's the price of access? Do you belong once you get there? Or are you still masking? And what is the toll is that's taking on you day after day? I think that's important to ask too. Yeah. B Bill says the cost is to your mental health. I place new boundaries. I give the job 8 hours and that's it. Mute my computer to limit access. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. That's so important. And a lot of us feel like we have to overwork sometimes because that's where our value lies. And that's why it's important to have an internal sense of value about yourself and not place it in external things that we're taught to seek through overworking, through outside validation, achievements, right? Having that internal sense, that's permanent. That's permanent. And it helps you begin to do stuff like establish boundaries. Yeah. Hi, Mike Musme. Yes, I often feel like the cost of access, is self-abandonment, having to stay silent to keep my job or having to mask to be accepted. Yep, self-abandonment. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah. That's so true. Abandoning your true self, your authentic self. Again, to survive, to navigate these environments that are hostile, that are toxic often, that don't allow us to be our true selves. What is the impact of that long term when you're doing that day after day? Right? Yeah, it is. It is. Yes. Benta, absolutely. Yes. It is. Yeah. And that's when I talk like things like identity work, right? A lot of us don't know who we are because we're forced to mask, take off parts of ourselves when we enter into these environments to survive. And so having to put those pieces back every single day, sometimes that's impossible, right? So really getting clear about who you are and your identity outside of this place. You may have to take this identity on to survive for the short term, however long you're there, but can you leave that at the door when you come home, right? And sometimes that's easier said than done if you've been masking all day. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the hearts. Thank you. Tajay says, I think a loss of humanity, yeah, is a huge cost. These systems and people who uphold them lack empathy and the understanding of what it means to be a healthy person to themselves and others. 100%. Yes. Yep. Loss of humanity. Yeah. That part. Lacking empathy, right? Lacking humanity, not having time to grieve, which I've talked about before. These policies that are very inhuman and don't allow us space and time to be human, right? Ourselves, to have natural human processes like grief. What is the impact of that? What is the cost of that? Benta says, one thing I did at the job I'm leaving now, is block time off on my calendar in the morning and before the end of the day so that I can protect some of my time each day and avoid meeting overload. Ooh, thank you for that tip. Block off time. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, anything that you can do to preserve yourself within these institutions, these organizations, like please do it. If you come across a strategy that helps you, right, share that with us. This is a community of learning, of knowledge, of resource sharing. In the comments, we would love to see it as we're developing strategies to really preserve ourselves within these institutions that are inhuman, right? We've been able to access, but what has been the cost of that access? Sitting with that, yeah. Yeah, y'all. Just looking through my notes. Acknowledging the trauma is important as well. So healing often starts with acknowledging that trauma was caused by institutional racism, right? So sitting with that, sometimes that can be a difficult thing to get to, that I was harmed, because again, the self-gaslighting can kind of take effect, right? This is not even real because I've been told that throughout history, right, this is supposed to be progress. I shouldn't be experiencing this anymore. So really sitting with the fact like, no, this is still a pattern that's at play and you are being harmed. Sitting with that, acknowledging that the trauma that you've experienced is important. Yes, the identity work is very new to me. Can you say more about that? Yeah, so I got this from Glamazzini on YouTube, her YouTube channel. Just asking ourselves, who are we? Right? A question I really had not asked myself before this time. Again, always focused on survival. Not sitting with what do I like to do? What am I good at? Right? The things that make me me, because we're socialized to be robots within the system so often. And so it's getting back those parts that make you unique, an individual person, and really sitting with who am I? What is my identity? What do I do outside of this role that I'm playing for other people? Just questions to ask yourself. So yeah, that's something I'm getting into, identity work, as I'm healing. E-Bill says another issue at work, yes, how the Black people are triangulated, yes, against each other, like the pet to threat situation you mentioned. Yes, I've seen this in real life. Yes, over and over again, right? We're pitted against each other. Again, a lot of the dynamics of a plantation system are still very much at play in institutions, workplaces, education settings, right? These didn't go anywhere. And that's important to recognize too. They didn't go anywhere. It changed, but did it improve? That's the question I've been sitting with. Yeah. 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 So it's important to feel what you're experiencing, validate your own experiences without minimizing what you're going through. This is traumatic. Experiencing institutional racism is traumatic, right? And it has an impact on our minds, our spirits, our bodies. The cost is not small. And so if you've been through this, if you've survived, an experience like this. Just acknowledging the trauma that has occurred. Were parts of yourself taken off along the way to survive a very rigid environment where you were not allowed to be yourself? And now you're having to reclaim those parts of yourself. That's not always easy. And that's a grief process too. Right? So just allowing yourself to feel what comes up is important. Yes, let's look through my notes. Yes, advocating for systemic changes is important. That will benefit future generations, which a lot of us already do, right? I know that leading a lot of the initiatives that I led, realizing that the people who are coming after me, right, they deserve to have a better experience than I had. And that's a value that a lot of us hold. So continuing to do that, but not at the detriment of yourself. I think that's important to mention too. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for validating the trauma. Being on the other side of so much career trauma is eye-opening. The reclaim of self is so challenging. I agree. It's a difficult process. Yeah, reclaiming yourself. Yeah, because you're having to go back through the very painful things that you experience in a lot of these organizations often. Right? Who were you before you entered into these organizations? What parts of you did you have to take off? Did you have to hide to survive? And now having to take those back on, realize what they are, that can be a difficult process. Right? So sitting with that, it's not easy. Yeah. Yeah. Butterfly Effect said, I had to speak with a Black woman recently to identify this trends and agree to resist. Yes, perpetuating triangulation, marginalization, and competition. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The competition with each other that's fostered, right? There can only be one place. That's what we're often told. It's like, yeah, that sense of we have to compete against each other to get to the top. Right? It destroys the bonds that we would have with one another, sharing information, resources, because now we're competing. And now only one of us can have this coveted spot. That's intentional. That's by design. Yeah. That gives me a video idea. Yes. Yeah. That's so real. That's so real. Yeah. Yeah. And so if you have experienced any of these things, if the cost of access has been high for you, right? Mental health challenges, physical health challenges, spiritual hurt, harm, please know that you're not alone. A lot of us are just like reeling, still reeling from what we experienced in these organizations. Right? Gaining access, but being harmed in the process. Is it worth it? But yes. I think that was all my notes. I didn't know how long this live was going to be, but just words of encouragement. Know that you're not alone. If you're experiencing, again, the effects of accessing an institution that did not want you there, right? Having to protect yourselves, put on layers, and now you're realizing the harm that was done. Healing is a slow process, but it can be done. It can be done to reclaim those parts of yourself little by little over time, right? Who you were before you entered into these environments. That's important. Aaron says, because we are relationship type of people, yes, when the system is objective and only looks at people for what they can do and not who they are, that's important. Ooh, yes, for what they can do and not who they are. And that's why identity work is very important, something I'm leaning into. Who are we individually, right? We're socialized to believe that what we do is who we are. How can we begin to unlearn that, to liberate ourselves from that idea? Because we came here, right, not doing something, and we were still worthy. So that means our worth is inherent, no matter what we do or don't do, just based on who we are inherently. Yeah. So, yes, y'all, I think I'm going to wrap up tonight, but I appreciate y'all being here, sharing your experiences in the chat. And know that healing is possible through spaces like this, through sharing what you've been through, writing to yourself, telling yourself your own story, what you survived, what you went through, the trauma that you survived, right? Journaling to yourself, voice noting, things like that, meditation may be helpful. Reclaiming your joy from those institutions will be very powerful in healing. Marilyn says, thank you, Marissa. Oh, yes. You know my age and a little bit about me. Slowly break the invisible chains, ladies. Yes. It was so nice to meet you, Marilyn. Yes. Yes. I agree. Yes. Slowly break the invisible chains. Yes. Benta says, oh, thank you. Yes. You're so welcome. I'm new here and so appreciative of your work. Thank you for this. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. And I'm glad you're here. So glad you're here. Yes, Mike Musman says, thank you so much. Your wisdom and vulnerability is so appreciated. Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate that. Yes, y'all. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night. Oh, Shanna, thank you. Love it here as always. I appreciate that. But yeah, until next time, y'all. Thank y'all so much for joining. Yeah, bye, y'all.